So if we don't have the biggest wise project in all of gaming, there's only one or two other teams that could have it worse than we do.
Welcome to the Long Game Podcast. My name's George Bafaloukos. In this podcast, we'll be taking a deep dive into the world of game audio. Join us as we explore the careers, challenges, and triumphs of the professionals who craft the sounds that bring our favorite games to life. Today's guest is Adam Croft. He's the technical audio lead at Bungie, working on Destiny 2. In this episode, we talk about his beginnings as an audio generalist, teaching himself programming, teaching and writing books about game audio, and managing one of the largest live service games of all time. A quick disclaimer. There seems to have been a bit of an XLR issue on Adam's mic in this episode. I did the best I could to mitigate it, but there are moments where it's still a bit legible. With that being said, let's dig in. All right, and we're back with another episode of The Long Game, and today we're joined by Adam Croft. How's it going, Adam?
It is good. How are you, George?
I'm doing good. Yeah, definitely hanging in there. Super excited to catch up with you. It's been a while. But yeah, I guess we usually just start off the podcast with an introduction about you from the very beginning, as far back as you care to.
Oh God!
As far back as you care to go. What got you interested in? That's entirely up to you. We've got all the time in the world. But yeah, I mean, really, just what got you interested in music, or what got you interested in sound, where you went to school. Anything that kind of helps the listeners get to know you a little bit better.
Oh, Lord. Well, I guess buckle up, y'all, because that's quite the story, or quite a long story. I first got into doing audio stuff because I wanted to be a rock star, just like every young teenager, and had a guitar given to me as a gift when I was 13 years old. When I wanted to play drums, and, nobody's parents wants to have that in their house, so that didn't happen for me. Gosh, from there, I dabbled in just noise making stuff for a little while until I went to college. When I went off to school, I went to school for a computer science degree and failed out of that. And then instead of leaving college altogether, I met a guy who had a theater. He was in a theater major, and they introduced me to the tech director of the theater department. And I suddenly became the theater department sound guy and got my degree in theater in a small college in Southwest Virginia. So it was perfect. I had a graduating class of 3, and my career was sarcastically going places. Moved to Los Angeles shortly after school, kind of tried to get into the industry because I wanted to be a recording engineer, but unfortunately, being a studio engineer was something that my generation had killed in high school with something called Napster. So that was slowly making its way out. There were less and less and less studios actually hiring out in LA. I did a recording engineering program out there at a school called the Los Angeles Recording School. And it's now owned by Full Sail, and I don't even know if they're called the same thing anymore at this point. But it was right smack dab in the middle of Hollywood. Did that for about a year. Got an internship at a studio in Glendale that went nowhere. Moved back to the East Coast where I'm from, and happenstance roundabout way got into indie film and started doing literally any job I could possibly do in indie film. The first guy who actually hired me tried to hire me 3 or 4 times, and I turned him down each time because I wanted to do sound, and that was the only thing he didn't really need to hire for was sound work. So, but eventually I did just about every job you could do on an indie film set, and then started getting into sound work from there, doing on-set production, eventually doing post-production. Came out to Seattle in 2010, roughly. Essentially, I took a vacation and never went home. Because there was nothing for me in the middle of North Carolina to find work at the time, because Atlanta hadn't taken off as a film hub yet at the time. Wilmington was dying as a film hub at the time. And there was really just nothing there for me in my hometown or around that area. And happenstance made my way out to Seattle, got hooked in with a couple of people through Craigslist gigs and other stuff. And long story short, I have now done in Seattle just about everything you possibly do, front of house sound, recorded music, live music. I was doing web series before YouTube videos were a thing. Done DVD box sets of stuff, production, post-production, was in architecture for a little while, 3.5 years doing AV architecture work, and then got into games because I was sick of doing the architecture work because it was the most stressful job I'd ever had at that point, and I actually had to look nice going to work, and who wants that? So then broke into games in about 2016 because I missed doing entertainment work and I wanted to get back to that, but I wanted to actually get paid. And now it's gosh, like 8 or 9 years later, and I'm still in the industry somehow magically. So, and I've been at Bungie now for a little over 6 years, 6.5 years almost now, which is just wild. It's just, it's weird. It was still weird to say that. So that's the long version of the story, as fast as I can make the long version.
Right on. No, that's awesome. And that's kind of like the first question that I wanted to ask. You and I kind of share a lot of similarities in that we've kind of started with like recording music and then went into film. And then you took like a long detour through all of those other disciplines and then found your way into games. I, for some reason, am just like terrified of anything live. So I've avoided that like the plague. It's just so stressful.
That's my favorite. I miss it. I miss it so much.
But yeah, I was meaning to ask. I mean, just looking at your LinkedIn, plus what you just mentioned. I mean, you had like radio broadcasts, you had studio recording, you had mocap recording. So was that just like circumstance? Were you just trying to make ends meet and doing whatever you could do in the audio realm, or was that like by design?
Well, when you're like part of my part of my story is like just trying to find a job to begin with. And I was like, when I first broke in, it was like around the Great Recession in 2008, 2009. So like not only was nobody hiring, but nobody was taking interns in LA at the time, which was hilarious. Like you'd call up and they'd be like, no, we don't want your free labor.
Yeah.
Because
right.
it was like a threat. Like if you offered free labor, they were like, oh, you're going to expect us to hire you at some point. So yeah,
Which
like
God forbid.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, like all the studio that I worked for as an intern is no longer even a studio anymore. Like I think there's a health something in that building, and it used to be like the place where it was like Yamaha's showroom at the time, or before I got there. It was like we had two live rooms, and they were super dope, super
That's awesome.
cool, but like nothing ever happened there. So, but yeah, like. Yeah, part of it was like just trying to break in and trying to find anything you could do, but at the same time, I don't know. I feel like when I talk to people like in their 20s who are young and trying to break into the industry, like now you can afford to like go to school for game audio or like have a game school, and that didn't exist when I was in school. Like you can do degrees for very niche things now, which is like cool. And on the other hand, as in like maybe not an old head, because I work with enough people who would look at me when I say that I'm old that they would scoff at that, but I'm certainly not in my 20s anymore. And like at that time, the only option I had was like a generalist degree or, something like that. Like even me having a degree in theater is laughable. It's super goofy. I use the degree technically all the time, but not for the way it was intended. So I didn't set out, to answer your question, I didn't set out to be like what I call a journeyman audio person, but I really wouldn't have it any other way. Most of the opportunities that I had were like happenstance that fell into my lap, or that I networked for, or that I was just right place, right time. Like a bunch of the stuff that I did was just like people who needed stuff. And I happened to be talking to people. And like I said, like I broke into doing indie film, not doing sound work. But I told everybody when I was doing like dolly grip work and, production assistant work and everything, I always describe myself as an audio engineer constantly. So, and anytime anybody needed that or offered it, like I would jump at the opportunity. And hilariously, the audio work was typically the lowest paid or the least paid, because usually people needed other things to be paid. But yeah, I mean, I just did what was available, what I found, who I met, like ways I networked in, all that sort of stuff. I hustled for decades and decades and decades to make everything work. Yeah, so I really appreciate that part, because it's kind of like what I'd like to tell like younger people breaking into the industry is it's like, don't worry about where you're going to get your start, and don't worry about getting your dream job, because like if my career is any indication to people, your career is more of a story than it is a destination. And you're going to end up doing a lot of different things as long as you like the only real qualification to be a professional audio person or sound designer or whatever it is just like, don't give up. If you just do the work and you bust your tail and you find unique ways to meet people and kind of get your face in front of people, and you build up the skill set at the same time, like the people who get in are the people who are undeniable, and you decide if you're undeniable or not. It's not, nobody's really gatekeeping anybody. So I've seen people from completely remote cities and other countries like break in and get stuff that is absurd, that they punched way above their weight class. And it's just you make your own story over time, and that's what I did and what I continue to do.
Yeah, right on. That's a really great way to put it. Because there was a couple things there that you mentioned, like the audio school thing not
Hmm.
being around when you're coming up, or like the specific game audio school. Yeah, I mean, I suppose Full Sail was around when I was going to college,
Yeah.
but it's a private school. It's expensive, you know. Like I ended up going to school for, I think my degree is audio recording technologies, and it was mainly just like a studio recording degree. It was
Yeah, which is just as useless as a theater degree when it all comes down to it. Yeah.
well, it's funny you mentioned the theater degree too, because a couple episodes ago I had William Lowe on, and he
Cool.
started out in sound design for theater, and he
Yeah.
has a degree in theater as well, and now he's teaching at a theater school, but he's teaching like meta sounds and whys for like,
That's
you know,
hilarious.
yeah, it's just like really interesting and something that I never even considered was a thing, not being, you know, a theater person. I'm just like, oh yeah, I guess that is nonlinear. That's very interesting.
Well, it is, and at this, I don't know. Like I learned this is how stupid my start was. Is I learned how to do how to do audio from a lighting designer who was a tech director who knew nothing about audio. So like he put me on the very first audio thing I ever did. The very first like live gig I ever did was a Jerry Lee Lewis cover band at the like theater in my college, and everybody kept pointing to the monitors to tell me to give them more monitors, and I had no idea. Like I didn't know what a monitor was. I knew a fader you could turn up and then it would make it louder, but like how we routed that, I don't remember if I routed it. I'm pretty sure I didn't. I'm pretty sure somebody pre-routed everything for me. It was just like run it, and then I had no idea what I was doing. And that was like 4 years of me like just, poking around things, and the guy who ran the theater, like he didn't really know audio. He knew a couple of things and he knew a direction to point me. But like I got an education in theater, in like working with people, in live reaction, in some basic gear and stuff like that. But like I really learned how to get timing, how to do live performance, how to, again, work backstage with people and work with egos and all sorts of different other things. There's a bunch of stuff that had nothing to do with like audio hardware and audio gear that I learned there that I take with me all the time.
Yeah, I mean, those soft skills are incredibly important no matter what you do.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah, oh, that's super interesting. Okay, well, yeah, that answers my question. And I guess next thing I wanted to ask you is, so you mentioned you went to school initially for computer science and you bailed on that pretty quick, and now you're the technical sound design lead at Bungie. How does that how does that work? Did you reteach yourself this the programming and like the technical side of audio, or how did that happen?
Yeah, it's very ironic. Thanks for noticing. uh,
I can't help it.
yeah, I guess you'd call me a self-taught programmer. So, like, okay, I'm gonna, for anybody who's younger, I'm gonna sound like a dinosaur. Facebook came out. Its first iteration came out when I was in college. Right. Like I remember it as the Facebook, and also like there were colleges that had their own individual Facebooks because Harvard started Facebook. And so it was like known as the Harvard Facebook to begin with. Right. And at that time, I was into like HTML4 web design, like way back in the day. And I had no idea how to actually write a computer program, but I really loved like making websites and GeoCities and Angel Fire free websites and all sorts of stuff. Essentially what I wanted to do was be a web designer back in the day. But again, I was like 5 or 10 years ahead of the curve in that stuff. So the closest thing to something I could get an education in with that realm was computer science. So I jumped in with both feet and I was like, oh, I'm going to learn all the cool stuff that I want to go do. And the next thing I knew, I was learning Java as a programming language. And I had no idea how programming languages worked and all the technicalities behind that stuff, and just the massive amount of complexity that can come with even a simple computer program if you're not like used to, string types and array types and all sorts of different, just basic computer science knowledge, right? And most importantly, it like wasn't what I wanted to do. And so I worked my hardest. And from what I could remember, like I just wasn't inclined to it at the time. There were lots of other like what I would say more incredibly nerdy people than me there at the time. And I just struggled with wrapping my head around a bunch of basic concepts. And the thing I blamed it on at the time was when I failed out was I had two different professors who wanted two different things in their programs and they had two completely different programming styles. And then at the end of the day, they graded each other's work. And so I would tailor one computer program for one teacher and one computer program for another teacher, and then they graded each other's stuff. And they neither
That's
of
kind of sinister.
well, okay, but here's the thing. At the end of the day, is I can blame it on that, but at the end of the day, the more proper explanation is I just sucked, right? Like I could have just been better as a student. I could have been better at what I was doing, and I'm sure at the same time my heart wasn't in it too. But yeah, like that happened. And what I think is hilarious now is I think I picked up Python or something like that. I picked up another programming language many years later in doing architectural AV work. And then I learned how to like script really complex formulas in Excel. And I made some tools for essentially like we were designing AV systems for buildings. So like there's a bunch of buildings around Seattle that like I have speaker designs and stuff in that I either worked on myself or had other people work with me. A lot of Amazon buildings, Amazon Spheres has my actual like speaker layout in it and all that sort of stuff, which was really cool. But we had to like spec out equipment. And if you don't know anything about architectural engineering, if you do the design part, then what you're doing is you're like laying out blueprints and you're creating shopping lists for people, but you have to create those shopping lists in like a vague way that specs out equipment that a contractor then can purchase later. And through many layers of red tape that are legal, like around legalities and stuff like that, it's not always that you just say, hey, buy this JBL speaker, please, and put it in your ceiling. Sometimes you have to say, buy a speaker that has this, the size of speaker in it and these plugs on the back and blah, blah, blah. And you try to get as close to the JBL speaker as possible. But at the end of the day, it's the contractor's job to make purchasing. So we had to spec out all of these pieces of equipment, and I built like essentially an Excel database that helped us speed up the process of data entry. And so that was like my first foray back into programming work. And later I was working at Microsoft at Xbox for localization work. And like we had to take, I was working on Forza 7 in the Loc group at the time. So for localization for Xbox games, sometimes they take English recordings and then like hand them off to their localization team, both to get translated and re-recorded. But like at the time, what we were doing also was taking those English VO lines and then futzing them with like a distortion or a flanger or tremolo or whatever like that. And it was like we'd tear apart the VO lines with horrible effects and then send them back. And then the dev team on the inside would reintegrate those files so that they could essentially do a file swap once the localization got back. But then the test team could listen and hear like, oh, German's supposed to be super distorted. So if I hear a super distorted English line and I have German on Forza 7 selected, and I'm hearing that line super distorted, that means we've properly hooked everything up, and then all we have to do at the back end is a wave swap, right? Yeah, so at the time, that futzing process was manual. Like we would jump into, God, what was it? I think it was SoundForge. Yeah, it was SoundForge. And we would process these lines. But if you had like 30,000 lines to do, SoundForge would like fritz out and crash after 2,000 lines, I think it was. So you had to like pay attention to how many sounds you put in SoundForge, so its batch job thing wouldn't crash and all this sort of stuff. And I was just like, this is the story of my life with programming as we get into like a more technical conversation is like, I'm just lazy. Like the reason I develop and the reason that I do programming work is that I'm lazy and I don't want to do like, I don't want to put like...
You're just front loading the work.
Yeah,
You're doing a lot of work in the beginning so that you don't have to later on.
I'm skill building at the same time as my argument, right? And also, if you work in game sound, then you're also kind of a software engineer, right? So I essentially figured out how to script SoundForge in such a way that I had a command line program that I could point to a folder or something like that, and it would futz all these lines in all these different languages, and it would keep account of how many files I'd sent to SoundForge, so it would kill SoundForge and bring it back up before that 2,000 file limit was reached and SoundForge would crash. So I like programmed this whole thing, spent like a couple of days doing that under the guise. I was a contractor at Microsoft at the time. So I was under the guise of like this group that had no idea what I was doing. And I was just like, I am not doing this work. This is stupid. I could probably script something and make it happen. And I did the research, figured it out, got this like terrible program working that nobody in their right mind would actually use now. I hit go overnight one night and left and came back, and then like I think I had to wait like 2 hours once I got back in the office the next day, and my work for like the next 3 weeks was done. And that's like if I hadn't had the idea and I hadn't had the bug hit me before that, ever since it was just like, yeah, this is super fun. Like this is what I want to do stuff like this, right?
Yeah, that's amazing. So it was just kind of like a practical need that you're just like, I can make this easier for everybody. And that's what kind of got you back into the technical side of things, which is really cool. And that kind of leads me into the next question I had. I just think that like, I mean, programming is difficult to learn in the first place. There's a lot of just like very foreign concepts. It's kind of like the opposite of like the way that a human brain works. Like you have to explicitly tell the computer what not to do as well as what to do. And I find that like technical sound design is kind of like one step further because it's just very I don't know what the right word is. You
It's a
can't
fake
see
job.
it.
That's what it is.
Like you can't see the audio, so it's like I've always thought that being like a true technical sound designer is like very difficult to learn just because every project, every system that you're building has very unique needs that are almost boutique to that project. So I'm
They
wondering
absolutely
like
are, yes.
how do you begin for somebody who's maybe interested in working in technical sound design, like where's a good place to start?
Well, it's just like there's people, if you find that you're inclined to like want to know how everything works, you're probably a really great candidate for doing tech sound work. Because the thing, especially in a AAA world, is technical sound design doesn't mean anything. It's a fake job title. Like at Bungie, I probably am more close to a tools engineer or that sort of lead who like I work on an NWise, I work with Reaper, I work with our custom engine, but I'm usually doing stuff that's more like buying leverage and workflow acceleration and workflow improvement stuff than I am like setting up the Wise project, right? There's other technical sound design jobs that are like all you do is play in Wise and you take sounds from a sound designer and implement them and integrate them and maybe script them into the game and stuff. So you got to kind of figure out what the job is. But everybody who I know who's ever done it is really just like motivated to play with computers and motivated to understand like how games work or I don't know, just crazy stuff. Like probably my biggest motivation once I realized I really enjoyed programming and could kind of do it on my own and figured out what I liked about it was I was like, oh man, like nobody makes plugins. Like if you're in game sound or you're looking at getting into game sound, like I was trying to really break in back when I was at Xbox localization. Like I got this localization gig. It was like my foot in the door of doing something at Microsoft or doing something within games. It was not an ideal job, was not where I wanted to stay at all. And then I slowly realized like sound design was a thing that I would have to compete with people who were significantly younger than me. And I might have already priced myself out of like doing sound design work, having come from a different career. And then like most composers were well trained and also like were freelance and had to network and all this sort of stuff. And like none of this stuff really fit me really well. And so I was wondering if my career was like over before it started at one point. And I was like, you know what? Like nobody does like really difficult programming work. Like at the time, again, what I thought was like making plugins. In that world, I didn't realize, but just because it wasn't right in front of my face, that like, you know, game engines are big complex programs. Reaper has a whole scripting language that you can use. Now even Pro Tools has that. There's all sorts of stuff with just dealing with data on a game and in Wise and the Wise authoring API. Like all this stuff exists now that like when I was breaking in was like very, very fresh. I think I actually got to work with like Bernard over at Audio Kinetics sent me a link to work with like the very first beta of the authoring API. And it was like the coolest thing I touched. And it was a real big blessing for me to like be asked to participate in that. It was cool.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But essentially, yeah, like how to get started. I don't know. I would say if you're like trying to get into game audio and you're thinking about doing audio for games, there's a class of people who really just likes to make noises. They like to record, they like to sample stuff, they like to be in Reaper all day long, they like to be in whatever DAW they're in all day long, and you don't care about the computer stuff. All that is kind of in your way. All you want to do is make cool sounds. Then you're probably not a technical sound designer. You might just be a sound designer, and that's super, super dope, super cool. I don't sit all day thinking about what sounds that I can make or get inspired by former sound designers or famous sound designers or anything like that. Like, I wanted to. I think making sounds is kind of a hobby, or as sometimes what I do is fun. But I get real jazzed when I'm like, oh, I can take this entire system or somebody's whole data management job and make this thing entirely automated and make all the work go away and make a robot do the whole thing for me, and I press a button and it goes. I just want to do that in the audio world. Right. And in some case, that's also like audio engineer, meaning audio software developer, is a real close, like, there's a real thin gray line between technical sound design and audio software developer, right? But if you find yourself like stoked on computing, or you get into a game engine and you like tweaking and kind of building the game a little bit, or you want to like understand how middleware works, or anything that's kind of like breaking apart the machine and figuring out how it works along with making sound, those people succeed all the time. And what I would also say is, if you're a person who's just trying to get a job in audio, and you think that technical sound design is either going to pay more or be easier to get into, to break in, like, that's also the wrong way to do it. You really got to be kind of neck deep into breaking things apart in some ways, because otherwise you're just going to do a thing that you don't really want to do. In terms of learning it and like where to get started, it's just like make stuff. Like that's the kind of the dumbest way to say it in a way, because your first question is going to be like, well, make what? What do you mean? But like, we live in a world of large language models now, and all you have to do is type in and go, I like the idea of technical sound design for video games. I want to start learning something. What programming languages do you suggest I use? What do you start suggesting I make? Like, can I program something really simple that like maybe is in Reaper that renames a bunch of stuff? Can I program a thing that reads in the name of a WAV file and allows me to rename it? Like, I don't know, any sort of goofy, stupid thing. Once you start getting down that rabbit hole, like, there is a very, very, very long pathway between like rename an audio file or convert an audio file from an MP3 to a WAV into like, hey, I want to know exactly the header file information that makes up all the bits of a WAV file, and can I get every single sample of the WAV file and manipulate that sample and make an effect, right? It's a very deep rabbit hole if you want to go that far.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's kind of what I gathered. I always kind of call myself like a sound designer with technical aptitude, but I would never call myself a technical sound designer, because I've met some technical sound designers like yourself and like Alex Hastings and like a couple people that I'm like close friends with that are just like, okay, we're doing two completely different things. Like, if you want me to like be working in Wise or work in Metasounds and build out a system, that I can do, but I can't build like tools within Unreal using C++ that will be something that other sound designers could use. You know what I mean? And that's kind of
but what I'd say is like, I don't even gatekeep the title like that. Like, and I don't mean that you're whatever.
Maybe I'm self-imposing that criticism. I don't know.
Yeah, what I'd say is like, every job wants to need something different. And usually what I've come to find out over the course of my career is like, I'm usually not fitting into a role, and most people who do tech sound design work aren't fitting into a role at a job. Like, an audio director may be like, oh, I need a technical sound person to, work with Wise or whatever. And then a person comes in who has the capability to like, script the authoring API or something like that, or maybe knows blueprints or something. And like, if a person is technically inclined and interested, and then they see the value in doing some more complex stuff, it just happens. Everybody I know who kind of bit the bug and got an aptitude for it and looks like a crazy engineering wizard is like, they just started doing stuff on their own, whether it be at the office or not at the office. They were just making stuff. And those people tend to become known as like, oh, that's that person. And if a game studio picks them up, they're not really hiring for a role. They're like, oh, we need like a person like that person, right? So that's it, but it just takes time to kind of build a thing. And, everybody starts at a different place and they decide how far they want to go in it. Like, I really found over time that I really like getting into the nuts and bolts of engineering, like software development work. And so I'm probably at this point on a closer end to an audio software developer or audio programmer than I am like just somebody who kind of dabbles in Wise and blueprints. But like, that took years. That took a really long time. At one point, I was just like making Lua scripts in Reaper just because it was fun. And I had no idea how to do anything crazier than that. And, I'm in the audio department at Bungie. I'm not in the engineering department. I flirt with those guys and like, work with them all the time. But, for me, there's also a trade-off of like being in the audio department. I get a heck of a lot more autonomy than I would if I were to be in a software engineering department at a game studio. So, for me, it's like, you got to kind of figure out where you fit. And this is a very large spectrum of skills and abilities. And if somebody came to me tomorrow and was just like, I know almost nothing about programming, but technical sounds cool and I want to dabble in it a little bit, I'd be like, cool, let's figure out how to do that for you and let's make it work for you. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great answer. I mean, it's very, I guess, opaque. It's very different for each person, but yeah, I think that makes sense. For sure. And
yeah,
that kind
I think the common thread is like the people who I see do the technical thing have some form of like, I want to know how this works. And that can go real deep if you want it to. But the sound designers I know who are just sound designers are people who like get microphones or samplers or synthesizers or whatever. And they don't care at all how like the code underneath it works or what the computer's doing or whatever. They just want to play with knobs. And they just want to hear the cool sound. And they just want to do that all the time. And that's awesome. I'm super into that too. That's just not the thing I like wake up every day doing, right? Like if I get the opportunity to do that sometimes, great. I don't think I've ever actually touched a DAW for sound design work professionally since I got into Bungie. Just largely because like we already have people who do a lot of that, and that's not the need here so much, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, just to kind of like piggyback off of that, like I do want to say that like even though I don't consider myself like a technical sound designer to that degree, my technical ability has definitely played a huge part in my being able to land jobs. Like just knowing how to do like native Unreal implementation, like some very light blueprint work, know how to tag animations, know how to set up ambient emitters and reverb zones. Like, I mean, that kind of stuff is important for somebody just starting out. I think that's like, can't go without saying.
It almost is like, when you work in a game studio, you should kind of be a game developer.
Yeah, who would have thought?
Yeah, like you'd be shocked at the amount of people who get into a AAA studio who know how to do their like personal artistic thing. And it's not just sound design. There can be like, writers, narrative people, artists, whatever, who are just like, I'm going to pick on an artist or artists just in general. Like I'm not, accusing anybody, but I'm just like, if you really like playing in Photoshop, you might just be the Photoshop person who makes, I don't know, icons or something like that all the time and can churn out a bunch of stuff, but you have no idea how to like hook it to the game. And there might be somebody at your studio who knows how to do that. And then you get away with being like the Photoshop person all the time. But not all studios are like that. And the more that you know about game development and the process of like making your stuff work in the context of a game and making, your artistic discipline, you're only going to become more and more hireable. You don't have to be as insane as me so far as like I went super hard on the game development and engineering knowledge to the point that I do less and less and less of the audio stuff. But, again, like I said, it's a spectrum. Go as far as you want.
Totally. And I guess that kind of like leads into the next question. I mean, between Halo and Destiny, you've worked on like two of the biggest FPS games of all time. And I'm curious just what being a tech means for working on these IPs that have like such an established like sonic palette and like audio language. What is it that, what are like the pros and cons, or like what's more difficult about working on a game that has like these iconic sounds that people have been listening to for so long when you're building new tech for a game like that?
Yeah, so what I'd say is like, I guess I worked on the sonic palette of Destiny more than Halo. I worked on like the very early days of Halo Infinite, what I'd call pre-production. Like none of the content or things that I actually worked on probably ever made it to the game as far as I know. But it was like the place where I kind of got my feet wet real hard on the dev side for the first time and like learned how the interior of a Halo game works and that kind of stuff. It was super fortunate opportunity, but they at the time at the very least had kind of a split system where you'd have sound designers working in Pro Tools and designing sounds a lot, and then you'd have implementers who were hooking those sounds up in Wise and like scripting stuff. And so I was more on that end, but I like worked on a very early automated test suite for them that I don't think ever got really used for the game. I was doing a lot of documentation work, a lot of reorganizing Wise and all that sort of stuff. At Bungie, I was leading the dialogue department for my first few years here. I actually built out a small team to handle a lot of the dialogue on Destiny 2 because we had a growing narrative department at the time. And so I was like working with voice actors and, you know, creating or continuing to operate systems to get voice into the game, to hire voice actors, to cast people, to get them turned into monsters and stuff like that. Again, for the most part, I had a group of designers who worked underneath me who were designing monsters and stuff like that, but we like either came up with concepts together, or maybe I'd lead that, or maybe I'd talk to narrative and have some ideas and whatnot. And really, like with Destiny, it's just like it's sci-fi fantasy, so we were looking at artwork all the time and working with art departments and other leads and narrative folks and all that sort of stuff, and just kind of trying to come up with a thing that fit the palette. And for me, in terms of thinking about that work, it's always about like, what do we not have? My favorite thing to talk about with narrative at the time was like, every character in Destiny 2 is somebody's favorite character. Destiny 2 isn't a game with like an explicit lead character other than you, the player, who isn't really like, it's the anti-Master Chief in a way. Like Master Chief has a very explicit character. You know who Master Chief is, what he sounds like, you know what Cortana is and what she sounds like. Whereas the player guardian in Destiny is supposed to be you. And so we like step on that as little as possible. Just all sorts of things. And I was like, anytime I can try to make you unique, that's what I want to do. So I spent a large part of my time doing that. And on the tech side now, like Destiny is a game that has been in development for 15 years, I think.
Between the
might
first
be 16.
and Destiny 2.
Yeah, well, so here's
right.
here's the crazy sauce. This isn't. I don't know if this is NDA or not, but whatever. I'm not saying
if
anything
it is,
that people
please
don't
tell
already
me,
know.
and I'll cut this out.
No, you're good. I'm not saying that any trade secrets. The Wise project that is Destiny all time. So that's like it at least goes back to 2010 at the very least. It might go back earlier than that.
That was like going to be my next question.
Yeah. So like everything in the Wise project related to Destiny 2 is not just Destiny 2, it's Destiny. It's all of Destiny from all time. So we probably have, if we don't have the biggest Wise project ever, we're one of the top 2 or 3. And I couldn't name you, like, the only game I could ever think of that's been around, like, in operation as a live service as long as we have been is League of Legends. And I don't know if they operate off Wise or not. I don't remember.
I feel like they do. I had Michael Chung on, and he works on League. I think they use Wise. I'm not sure if they always used Wise, but I think they do now.
Like, and then there's the other question of, like, did you port all your content? Like, what does that look like, right? So, if we don't have the biggest Wise project in all of gaming, there's only 1 or 2 other teams that could have it worse than we do. And I've gotten the good fortune to work with the folks at Audio Kinetic on some specific problems before, and every time we show them our project, they're like, what are you doing? Like, we're just like, we're this crazy anomaly that are using their product in a way that people just like don't. I've had like literal senior engineers on calls with me, and they're like, wait, can you show me your project? Because I believe what you're saying is happening, but like, I have to see it, right?
I mean, I just truly can't even imagine what that even practically looks like. Like, I mean, I'm just trying to imagine just like the default like hierarchy, like not even going into the nuts and bolts, just like, how do you have 15 years of one video game in one Wise project? That's insane.
Well, the answer is you come up with systems, and then you stop using those systems and you come up with other systems. And the other crazy thing is, like, people don't remember, but Destiny started as a boxed product.
Right.
And the first drops of content that were DLCs, and even those you could buy in a box. Now we don't drop anything in a box, and all it is digital updates, right? But like, this game has survived through that entire process. So largely what we are fighting in the tech world on Destiny is like, keeping the Titanic afloat, right?
No kidding.
I mean, I say the Titanic as a euphemism, but it's like, what is the world's largest cruise ship that was, built and sailed in 2010? And then also, how do we like keep that cruise ship running with its old engine? And also, how do we upgrade it and tack stuff onto it while it's sailing? Like we never go into port. We never stop. We don't like the one rule of Destiny is you never like stop and look at it and rebuild it and get rid of tech debt or anything like that. We never. My favorite analogy for anybody who is ever getting hired at Bungie is, do you like going on a runaway train that's on fire? That's like, people are screaming on the train, and are you willing to jump onto that train and just ride it, right? And that's what working on Destiny is like. We go and we make stuff, and we, are constantly making content, constantly trying to make improvements, and constantly trying to make things great to a fan base that's like not never satisfied, but like we could never make anything. We could never have enough time to make the most perfect thing for a player of Destiny. I'm sure that if we made the most perfect Destiny game ever, there would be players out there going like, "But you missed this thing," and that's what, right? Like, we just have a rabid.
I mean, that's just the video game
1,000%.
industry as a whole at this point. I just don't think there's any world where you could do something as perfectly as you possibly could, and somebody's going to have an issue with it. I mean, I
absolutely love them for it. Like, it's our players especially have an insatiable appetite, and that's because they love what we do and they love what we work on.
Yeah, absolutely, and it speaks to, I mean, the 15 years that this game has been going strong. I mean, like, really, it's not slowed down. Like, I still have friends that play Destiny every night for a couple hours, especially exactly. Like when a new expansion comes out, like they're trying to just get geared up for the raid, like night of,
Yep. Yeah, so the job now that I do largely is like systematize as much as I possibly can in our work and our workflows, buy as much leverage as possible. Like, how can we make things as turnkey as we possibly can? Not in terms of content creation, but like the way that I look at it is we have sound designers who are very, very, very great at making very, very unique and special things. And I want 100% of their time spent on that. If they are spending time hooking up files into the game, if they are spending time doing any like data management style stuff, if they're spending time doing anything that's not creative and is just manual labor, I want to rip that from their cold dead hands as much as I possibly can. And anything that's on top of that I can make that helps aid their creative process and, helps spit out iterations or ideas or anything like that, I also want to do. So like I've spent time optimizing and automating a bunch of stuff in our voiceover process. So like we can create designs for new characters, but once the designs are created, then all we have to do is either hit a series of buttons or use a farm server to, run processing all those WAV files. So no, like a human doesn't have to touch that stuff ever again. They just design it and then all that content can get into the game. We've done similar stuff for like setting up music. We have composers and folks who lay out the levels in the game and lay out the entire experience to make it very, very bespoke for the player. But like the Wise setups, we've gotten to be pretty systematic and consistent. So, we might have a palette of music that we can use that's all in Wise that essentially acts as a database, but then we call very specific things inside the game, right? So I don't want to have somebody spend hours or days building music container objects that all have, transitions between them and a shitload of complexity or something like that by hand, when I can have like an agreed upon system to do that. And then they can, the designers can figure out where the music needs to change and all that stuff. Very unique, very bespokely. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I feel like that, there's a lot of studios that could really benefit from somebody with that skill set and that just inclination. If you're that kind of tech and you're able to expedite the process to that degree, then it just makes sense, like at a business level.
Oh yeah, 1,000%.
Let the sound designers make the content, and then you're working on speeding up the integration of the content. I mean, it's really a no-brainer.
Yeah, and it's a very different process. Like a regular single-player story game that's in a AAA studio, this wouldn't work. Like what we do is not built for that.
Well, there's not really a need for it either.
Right, exactly. A single player story game you kind of hack together and you're building it over the course of years, and that thing may turn over 2 or 3 different times in terms of its actual design and then like the story of the game and all that sort of stuff. And you've got a golden path on that, and maybe you've got some branches to go off of and everything. But like a large part of that game is to like hide and essentially act as a theater department in a way, like hide all the stuff that's broken and have the player play through the very specific paths that you're supposed to go to. And anybody who breaks it and tries to speedrun it or something like that, we're not making the game for those people, right? But you're also making this game once, and then you might make a sequel, but that's its own standalone thing. Destiny makes not the same content over and over and over again because we try to change that up, but we have, systems of exotic weapons. We have different types of missions that are put together in a similar fashion, but like we do different styles of branching things based on those same ideas a lot, right? So, and especially just overall systems of like putting content in the game. If we hired people, we would need an army of people to do it. And we sometimes do. We have armies of development partners and full-timers and contractors and whatnot. But like, there's just no way feasible to make the game the way we do in the depth and the quality that we do without, tech work and automations and workflow improvements and all that sort of stuff too. So
Yeah, absolutely. That's super interesting. Thank you so much for digging into that a little bit more.
yeah,
Just praying for your Wise project for years to come.
Man, I just one day, if I could have one thing, if somebody from Audio Kinetic ever listens to this, which I bug them about it anyway, but the one thing that I really, really want Wise to adopt one day is dynamic work unit loading. Like, you don't realize this, but what people do when they double click Wise and they open it is Wise scans every work unit document and loads in some sort of information and metadata information about it. And if I could do anything, I would have it not load all the work unit information up front and have that load on a computer thread that's not the UI thread, so that you could click on the UI and things would automatically load in the background for you. And then your Wise project load would take like 3 seconds and maybe even less than that. And then for us who have like a massive Wise project, it loads in the background while we click around. And it doesn't matter for like smaller projects or even single player until you get to the end. But for us, it's like, ugh.
Even if you were able to like load up your Wise project and then have a list of the work units and say like, I only want to load these 3 right now. That's all I'm
and
working
you can do
on.
some of that. I've spent many a day trying to hack around Wise project load and like just amount of data and information in Wise, and they have coded it in such a way that like the load time is the load time regardless of what I do. So I'm not 1,000% sure of what's under the hood because I haven't taken time to inspect it, but it's crazy.
Might have to
so
get Damien on here and see what he has to say about that, or get
I'm
you
only
and
going to say
Damien on
nice
at the
things.
same time.
Look, like I have no.
I will
guys who make
moderate the
Wise-
conversation. You guys can talk.
The guys who make Wise may have like they do magic on their own, right? And like they
Absolutely.
have enough of us developers who are asking for crazy amounts of stuff that their backlog is full no matter what.
Of course.
So like I'm not complaining. I have bespoke needs, right? Like very specific. I've already told them I've been at conferences and stuff before where I've talked to some of their C-level people and been like, can you do this for me? Can you please do this for me?
Just like put me a little bit higher up on like the on the list. Like
you gotta there are
wait your
channels
turn.
to make this happen. I'm just it is what it is.
No, I hear you, man. That's awesome. But okay, like we're getting towards the end, and I feel like this could take a little bit of time. But my last question was like, among everything else that you do, you also teach game audio courses. You write books. I want you to kind of talk more about like what got you interested in doing that. Like I personally took your Unity C# class like when I was first starting out, and it really helped me.
Well, thank you.
I want you to talk a little bit about the Quit Aspiring books.
Sure.
Whatever you can to just kind of like introduce people to some of the stuff that you do outside of the actual tech work that they could maybe learn from.
Yeah. So it's been a little while since I've really done work outside of my day gig regularly. But yeah, a while ago, gosh, probably almost 10 years ago, I had a Unity C# course, which isn't available now, largely because it would be out of date if I put it up for sale now. Like, I would have to go back through Unity and Wise in their current iterations and like describe how to program and all of that sort of stuff. But it was useful at the time. And I have two
It did
books.
help me a lot.
Thank you. I'm happy to help you. And then I have two books on breaking into game audio called Quit Aspiring Volume 1 and Volume 2. Essentially, all of those projects evolved out of me having an opinion and or finding that like something was missing in the marketplace. Like when I broke in, I took... like when I got into games, the last thing I did for education was to get in Leonard Paul's School of Video Game Audio. And if I could advocate for anybody, like if you don't know what you're doing and you want to break in, go spend a couple $100 with Leonard. It will totally be worth your while.
Yep. I took his Unreal class, and that helped me. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
that really helped me land my first gig because I knew native Unreal. It wasn't just Wise.
Yep. He's a super great dude. I've met him in person, and he's an absolute delight. I took his courses, gosh, it was probably in 2012, 2013. It was long. And on top of it, he's been doing this for a really long time. And he didn't have so much in the way of like implementation kind of stuff when I took his course. It was just like sound design and hook stuff up to Unity. And even at the time, what I would say is his Unity implementation stuff was really lacking. Like I would make sound effects and then I'd go to hook them up into Unity, and like the information wasn't exactly there because it wasn't like, I think he was expecting you to do a wave swap at the time or a sound swap. And because there wasn't like a play sound call, like he didn't direct you how to do that. And I got like really frustrated. And at the time, there was also like next to no information on the internet of how to get into a game script and like hit play on a one shot in like a way that you wanted it to play back that wasn't prescriptive of the game. So we'd like get into these the free games that come with like Unity and Unreal and stuff like that, and go take a demo game and like add your own sounds to it. And I just like, it drove me nuts trying to figure out how to do the complexity that I wanted to do. And eventually I figured out how to do it. Eventually I dug through enough content and enough stuff where I figured out how to do it. And then Wise got way better with like hooking into the game and allowing you to script their stuff way, way easier. And there was just no, like finding the documentation in a single place that was like really digestible and easy for a sound designer to pick up that wasn't like, programmer inclined, just existed literally nowhere. And so I decided to make it. And that's where that first course came from. And since then, Leonard has added a lot more like Unity, C# programming, Wise kind of stuff to his courses. And I think there was one or two other guys who made like YouTube videos on Unreal scripting and stuff like that. So it was shortly after I made all that, like even more content came out and people doing stuff with Fmod and all sorts of stuff that was super useful. And so that information is significantly more ubiquitous, even if it's out of date on like YouTube or something like that. Like I guarantee you Leonard's School of Video Game Audio is probably the best place to find that stuff now. But that's mostly where that came from. And I've just always had an interest in explaining things like complex ideas to people that think like, I hate when people who are sound designers go, "Oh, I can't program." I'm like, you totally can. You just don't think that you can. Like, it's really not as complex as you think. The things that you want to do aren't really that difficult. Once you learn how to write a thing in Lua in Reaper that mutes a track or renames a thing, all that a lot of sound designers typically want is like, hey, how can I make naming my tracks easier? How can I, print this to make iterations faster and all that sort of stuff? It's not rocket science. You're not building whole complex systems typically as a sound designer. And so I've always been interested in just breaking people in and seeing how far they go. And that's where a lot of that stuff came from. In terms of the books, I come from a freelance background. So even at Bungie, like I am an employee, but how I consider myself is like, I'm a freelancer and Bungie is my one and only client. And so I've always come from that background of how to think. And I noticed, like, breaking into the industry that people lacked a lot of skills in terms of, like, how to find good clients, what good clients look like, how to quote unquote sell yourself, how to network in a way that wasn't like schmoozing some people and handing out business cards, and how to price yourself in the marketplace, and, you know, all of that, but the bunch of the soft skill stuff for the most part. And the first book came out of like Twitter anger, probably, to be, if I'm going to be totally honest.
There was plenty of that.
Yeah, I mean, this was a long time ago too. Like that first book was 2017, something like that, 2018. I don't remember.
That sounds about right.
But so that was like, I was coming up and I was still a contractor when I wrote that first book. But it was essentially like, hey, how do you want to break in? And I tried to give everybody as much information as I possibly could, especially about things that I disagreed with other people about. And for the first book, I also brought in or asked for contributions from people I really respected. And I had a bunch of different voices giving their own thoughts and opinions about some simple questions and whatnot. And really just try to give people more information to help get a foot in the door. And the second book came after I'd been at Bungie a number of years and I had done hiring. So I kind of had a full-timer's view and a hiring manager's view. And I had a little bit more information than what I had for the first book. And I would say I kind of like probably cooled off my frustration and opinionatedness too. And I just wanted to help people help themselves. Because especially when applying for a AAA gig, what a lot of people don't realize is like for any sound design gig for a place like us at Bungie, we're getting near 1,000 applicants, and that's pre-COVID, pre-remote work, right? So
yeah, I believe that.
Like you just don't, people spend like weeks or months crafting the perfect resume and the perfect reel and all the perfect cover letter and stuff, and then they throw it out and never hear anything. And they're like, I spent so much time. And I'm like, yeah, and if you didn't grab the hiring manager in the first 30 seconds, all that work that you did doesn't matter, right? And those are like...
Yeah, or like personally know them.
Well, that, yeah, I mean, that too.
Like, it's getting to that point.
Well, what I'd say, like, is networking has always been a part of the entertainment industry, right? And I would say it's not always been nepotistic as, oh, if you know somebody, you can get a gig or whatever. But like, to the games industry especially is, there's not, you know, 1,500 sound designers in the world who work on games, right? There's like hundreds, right?
Which is crazy to think about.
Maybe
You're probably
1,000,
right? Like in all of video games. Wild.
And to keep in mind too, this is probably the time where there is the most amount of sound designers that have ever existed for this industry on top of it, right?
Yeah. And tomorrow
it's like access becomes more and more available. But people don't understand, like, because everybody wants to do this, it's not an easy thing to get into. And you have to really learn how to advocate for yourself. And you have to bust your tail to be head and shoulders above other people here. If you just, you know, like making music and want to make it for video games because you love playing video games and always dreamed of this and it'd be really cool, but you never spend time actually making music and like tailoring it to clients and learning all those lessons, you're never going to get in the industry because you're not doing the work, right? You really have to like be somebody who's working on sound design, who has become a skilled sound designer, or at least an entry-level skilled sound designer, who is willing to go out and talk to people, at least on Twitter or Blue Sky or whatever social media it is, if nothing else. You have to know the properties that you're looking at applying to and know what games that they make, and you know, being connected to people and being even in the city that they do the work in makes it even easier, right? Now in a post-COVID world, we can be more remote, but at the time, like many years ago, it's like, well, if you wanted to work on Halo and you didn't live in Seattle, like, good luck, right?
Yeah, and I do feel like we're kind of going back to that, but not to the same degree.
Yeah,
I think
totally.
The remote work is kind of going away, but it still exists, and more so than it did prior to COVID, but not to that same, like, everybody is working remote because we were forced to work remote, you know?
Yeah, there was almost zero remote work before COVID. And now what I'd say is what you're finding remote work is in external development teams. So we've got more audio houses now that the AAA model has gone from like hiring individual people as contractors to hiring like groups like Team Audio and Sweet Justice and Injected Senses and whatnot to a million of those groups that I can name, all badass people. And a lot of them work remotely because they're just hiring, either people full time or they're hiring a set of contractors to come and spin up and work for their big properties, right? So, like we've got more of that than ever and whatnot. But yeah, essentially, like the second book especially was, hey, I've been a hiring manager now. I know how hard this is. I know that the vast majority of people who are trying to get into the industry have no idea how difficult hiring actually is, and how emotional it is, and how little time you get to spend with any one person's resume and all of that sort of stuff. So I was trying to give hey, if you're tailoring something, this is how I would suggest you tailor it. Part of it's my opinion, and part of it is, I think, generally good, right? So I don't know that I would ever do any more content in that way because I just don't know that I have anything else to say. But I don't know. These are things that get in my head, and certainly I want to be altruistic and say, oh, I want to help the next generation of designers and all that sort of stuff. But largely, sometimes I have things that are in my head that I need to get out, and that's the best way that I have known to get it out. And thankfully, it's been able to help some people sometimes. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would highly recommend them both, even if the first is more just you just venting about the industry. I haven't
gone back to read it because I'm like, oh, it's going to be so cringe if I go back and read this. Oh, it's going to be just me being angry at everybody. Oh, no.
Consider me just listening to every single podcast I record and just listening to my own voice and editing it. Ugh. It's just like, oh man, this is
the thing of being somebody who makes stuff. Like you go back and then see what you did 10 years ago, and you're like, oh, that's embarrassing. Oh, and that's just going to happen forever.
Oh man, well, I love it. Thank you so much. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but this was super, super interesting. And I think that anybody who listens to it is gonna get a lot out of it. So yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to do the podcast with me.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for chatting with me, and for anybody still listening, if I can tell you to do anything, it's go make cool stuff, man. Nobody's gonna come knock on your door to help you get in the games industry, whether it be sound designer, musician, or technical, whatever. It's all within your hands, and the only person doubting yourself is you. So just go make stuff, and make stuff that you like and that you're having fun with, and screw all the rest.
Right on. I couldn't think of a better way to end it. All right, guys, we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Adam.
You're welcome.